There are several concepts in Microsoft 365 that allow teams to work together, groups of users to either communicate together, share information, or for you to communicate with them, or for users in the organization to reduce the amount of individual people they need to talk to and just talk to groups. These concepts of teams and groups are represented in Microsoft 365. So let's look at how we create teams and groups. First of all, the concept of group is one that's pretty common in Microsoft ecosystems. Going back to on-prem solutions within an Active Directory domain, we would create a group and then we assign permissions to that group. For organizations that had Exchange Server 2013, 16 or 19 on their network, those groups would then be associated with an email address. So those groups would become mail-enabled groups, groups that you can use both for assigning permissions and then assign them an email address so you could communicate with them as a single entity. Microsoft 365 is enhancing and going way beyond these concepts of groups and teams and email addresses. And let's take a look at the different options of groups and teams that we can create in Microsoft 365. So if I click on Teams and Groups, I have a link here for Add a Group. I have already existing groups here, and I'll go through the various types of groups that can be created. So I'm going to click here on Add a Group and I've got 4 options. So let's talk about the differences between those 4 options. The first one. Note that it says recommended. A Microsoft 365 group actually does a whole lot. It is much more than a group. It creates a group. It creates a mail-enabled group, so that group has an email address, and it also creates a Microsoft team and associates a team to that group. So it essentially creates a shared workspace for all of the individuals that are in that group to work together, exchange files, exchange calendars and documents. A Microsoft 365 group is really AM 365 group and team. The two of those elements are really coupled together and created automatically as soon as you select the Microsoft 365 option. If I work one step backwards from that, I have a mail-enabled security group. So a mail-enabled security group is exactly like a Microsoft 365 group, except it doesn't have the teams. So the Microsoft Teams component is not there. So you essentially have a group to which you can assign permission, just like a Microsoft 365 group. It has an email address just like a Microsoft 365 group. However, it doesn't have the associated workspace that's created in Microsoft Team. We also can create a security group. A security group is a group that can be used for permissions only. So this is similar to a standard group that we create as part of our Azure Active Directory infrastructure. So if you go into Azure AD, that is the type of group that you create, a security group, a group of users that need to have the same type of access, the same type of permissions. And again, one more step backwards from that is a distribution group. A distribution group is a group that has an email address, but it does not have access to any resources. You cannot give permissions to a distribution group. You can only do that to security groups or Microsoft 365 groups. So now let's go ahead and create a group. And of course, I'm going to create the recommended group, a Microsoft 365 group. I'm going to give it a name. Typically your group would be named after a department or maybe a project or a city. So I want this to be Project 1, and in Project 1 I'm going to have multiple users that are going to collaborate. I'm going to click Next. And now I can assign an owner to the group. The group owner will be able to modify the membership of the group, modify settings for the group, and it'll be able to manage all of the configurations of the group through its own interface. So I can assign an owner, and I'm going to pick myself as the owner of the group. And here I am, and I'm adding myself as an owner. It also notes here that I am already Teams enabled, which means that my user account has the necessary licensing in order to use Microsoft Teams. I'm going to click on Next and I can add members, every member of that group. We'll receive all the emails that are sent to the group, we'll be able to access the team's workspace, and we'll have access to all of the resources that this group has been given permissions to. So I can click Add Members and select other users in my infrastructure, and I can also select other groups, because groups can be members of other groups. I'm going to click on Next, and then I'm going to specify an email address for the group. Now remember that group can receive emails, so we need to specify an email address, and I'm going to call it project1. There's a validation that occurs to verify that the email address project1 at my domain is not already taken by another recipient, and that recipient could be another group or a user. And then I can specify the privacy of this email address. Is it private or public? Basically mean whether that email address will be accessible from external users or only internal users. Sometimes you may want a group to be used only by users of your organization. Only they can send email to that group, so you don't want to expose it to the internet. So I have the choice here of public and private. I'm going to leave this one public. And then I mentioned the team, the fact that we have this shared workspace, so I can disable that and remove the team if I want to. But the default is to add the team to the group. I'm going to click on Next, click Create Group, and now the group is being created. After the group is created, I can modify some additional properties of the group. I can add additional members, remove members, add new owners to the group. There are lots of different options. And of course my Microsoft team is going to be created as part of my infrastructure.